What is happening to you when you're triggered? Stay tuned. We have this fun word that is used so often today, the word triggered. What does that really mean? Do you ever get triggered? What happens when you get triggered? What does it feel like? Who did this to you? I think triggered is a very appropriate word in our society today because everything is push button. We push buttons on a phone, on an iPad, on a computer, and it's all done for us. So triggered is just like you pull that trigger and there, I'm feeling something. I had a case of being triggered just recently. I was working in my apartment and there were some kids who were screaming their heads off, not far from where I lived. And I was really wondering when their lungs and their windpipe and their vocal cords were going to give out, because I had never heard kids scream so much. And I just wondered, like, how do they keep that up? How do they do that? So after a little while, I started to get more and more irritated, and I thought, oh, they're probably going to stop at some point. But they didn't. They kept going. And so I did what any reasonable person would do, and I started to contemplate throwing a chair through the window. And but then I held back and I thought, I'm an NLP guy, so I should know how to deal with this, right? And so I reached into my NLP toolkit, and yes, sure enough, I discovered I knew how to deal with this. What's happening here? I'm being triggered. No, I'm not being triggered. This is my response, because there is no universal fact or scientific evidence that kids screaming will make every living creature in proximity become irritated. So I take responsibility for the feeling. That's the first part. That's what I did first. It's my feeling. It's not anyone or anything making me feel this. So then I asked myself, well, what is the positive intent of the response that I'm having? And it took me back. It's what we call a transderivational search. It took me back to a time when I was a kid and I was screaming my head off because I was having a good time. And then I got scolded by an adult that not to do that. It was bad, or whatever it was, whatever they told me. And so there was this piece of me that was irritated because I wanted to scream, and it wasn't fair because these other kids were screaming and they got to do it and they got to have a good time, but I couldn't. It's not fair. So it's really interesting, and I know this probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but the unconscious part of your mind often doesn't make much sense. Just examine your dreams to know that that's true. I mean, dreams don't make any sense whatsoever most of the time. And that was the case with this very immature part of me. So when you discover something like that, what you need to know is that that part of you hasn't grown up. It's been isolated, alienated. So it's time to grow that part up. And sometimes that part might need a resource. Like you might need to give it a resource that it didn't have at the time that you were experiencing that. So I grew that part of me up, and I didn't throw a chair through the window. And logically, I just went outside of my apartment and just screamed my head off, along with the kids, of course. And my neighbors, they looked at me strangely, but it's Santa Cruz. We like to keep it weird here. So anyway, if you find yourself being triggered, just take a moment, acknowledge that this is you having this response, and ask yourself, is this response useful? Most of the time it's not. Sometimes it might actually be a useful response, or it might be a somewhat useful response, and it might need to just be updated or modified. So check in with that first. For me, throwing a chair through the window or being triggered was not a useful response at all. So I decided right away that It's not a good idea to be triggered. I don't want to be triggered anymore. I want to do something different. And that's whenever I went in search of the positive intent. You want to know what the positive intent is, because you don't want to necessarily just get rid of behavior or get rid of being triggered without understanding why you were being triggered to begin with. And in NLP, we say all behavior emanates or originates from a positive intent. In fact, I would recommend that you find 3 or more behaviors that could adequately, realistically express that same positive intent. And in this case, I was able to then accept my feelings about it not being fair with the kids, and everything was okay, and hasn't been a problem since. And that's the whole idea behind this. Check out my website, nlp-gym.com. Follow me on Facebook for real-time updates on upcoming workshops that I might be teaching, or upcoming talks that I might be giving. And soon I will be hosting Dr. Matt. He will be coming to Santa Cruz in early November, and I will be hosting him for 3 talks. I'll be putting more information out there soon about when that will be and what the topics will be. If you like this video, please click like right down here and leave me a comment or a question. I will follow up with you. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button so you can get these videos on a regular basis. Take care.